What's going on, guys? It's Justice here and welcome back to episode 2 of What's New in PvM. Straight away I'm going to kick off with the Concentrated Blast buff and what you could also say with that as a result, the Sonic Wave nerf. Essentially what they've done is they've tried to balance out the two abilities in order to make dual wield competitive with two-hander. With a two-hander setup, and the main developer behind this change was ModPie, and he did post on the forums in the future game update around a week or two before this was released, just to give people a heads up and a warning that this is coming. So essentially, dual wield, once you hit over 65% hit chance against a boss, the Concentrated Blast, if used correctly with all 3 hits, will become competitive against using Sonic Wave. And I just want to reiterate, that is if you're using all 3 casts, so if you're going through the full Concentrated Blast animation, because with each blast you accumulate 5% critical bonus onto your next ability, and that also channels through Concentrated Blast as well, so you do build it up and you have an increased damage output of Concentrated Blast itself as well, so it's quite nice if you go through a full cast, and it's really good to use before, let's say, a Wild Magic, where you'll have an extra 15% critical hit bonus onto that Wild Magic. And with this, of course, I am using Magic as my main example. This has also been applied to Fury, the melee equivalent. So yeah, on the face of it, when you look at those numbers, you will then go and have a look at, what bosses you have over 65% hit chance, and therefore you'd think, okay, dual wield's going to be better. But what it doesn't factor into consideration, guys, is the adrenaline, and the fact that you're going to be losing out on overall adrenaline compared to using Sonic Wave. So you've got to factor in adrenaline gain, and therefore Sonic Wave does still have the edge overall, and therefore two-hander weapons do still have the edge overall, and that is due to the adrenaline gain that you can get out of it because it's just a one cast ability, and also the mobility that you get from just that one cast ability. It's great for places like Rise of the Six, for example, or anywhere where you just want to cast the ability off quickly, move on to your next one and not go through a full animation of Concentrated Blast. But what I do have to say is that they have done a good job in terms of bringing in line the two abilities closer together. They are very, very close now on performance overall, and therefore you're not going to see huge differences between it. A large part of that is, yes, because the Sonic Wave has been nerfed down from the 10% accuracy being applied to your next ability to 6% now, and you will feel that a little bit in boss fights. And also one thing to consider, if you are using a dual wield setup right now and you're using Seismic 1 and Singularity as a magic setup, the best advice is probably to use all 3 Concentrated Blast hits situationally. And I think the way they've done this update is that if you are going to dual wield, then it's going to be situational DPS, and you're going to have to pick and choose when you want to just cast 2 hits of Concentrated Blast compared to doing a full animation of 3 blasts. I would say it's going to be very situational. I think that was one of the things they were going for when they were developing this change and this buffed Concentrated Blast. They want to make it situational in terms of your DPS. You've got to think, okay, this is a DPS check right now over the next few seconds, so I really should go through a full Concentrated Blast and then follow that up with a Wild Magic, let's say, where you're going to get more damage out of it. Or you might be, actually, no, I just want to build adrenaline a bit quicker at this point in time, so I'm only going to cast 2 hits, the Concentrated Blast, and cancel it early. So you've got those things to consider, and I'm just glad that they've actually made it worth it now in certain situations to go through a full animation compared to it just always being not worth it and you just always have to cancel after the second hit. Dual wield is now much more competitive, and it's very, very close in terms of the performance that you're going to get out of it compared to two-hander weapons. So overall, a good update with the buffed Concentrated Blast. Some people might be a bit, salty against the fact that Sonic Wave's been nerfed and why couldn't they have just kept it the same. But at the end of the day, they just wanted to make dual wield more competitive DPS-wise. If you do want to work out your hit chance against bosses, which is really cool to do, by the way, and I was working this out through wiki formulas and stuff, and then I realized I actually came across a calculator which has been developed by CheapApp. It's really awesome. All the formulas there for you, so all you need to do is select the different gear setup that you've got, your levels, and it'll work out the hit chance against bosses for you, and that's really cool to check out. And this is something which, when I was reading it up, I got really interested in this sort of stuff, and just knowing that, for some reason, I never really bothered looking into hit chance properly and really took time to understand it, and it's really interesting to understand that the bosses that you're fighting, they have their own defense level, they have their own armor rating, and you will then use all of that information against your accuracy to work out, essentially, what is your hit chance against this boss. And I guess I really haven't had a reason to really look into that until now as such, when you're comparing dual wield to Sonic Wave. When a developer goes, when your hit chance goes above 65%, it's then going to be competitive, and therefore, okay, now I'm thinking, okay, where do I have that? So it's pretty cool, and I'll leave all the sources of information for that in the description. And the main ways that accuracy is influenced on you as a player is first off your base accuracy, which is determined by your actual skill level against the weapon that you're using. You then have additives to that, whether they're additives that multiply or whether they are flat boosts. So the ones that multiply upon each other and it can actually stack are things like your scrimshaws, your auras, for example, and then in terms of just flat boosts that add to your accuracy are things like your Reaper necklace. There aren't many flat boosts, by the way. Most of them just multiply. But flat boosts, what will happen is they will just be added at the end of your calculation just to give you a flat bonus, and they are always the best. So a Reaper necklace, once that's got all the way up to 30 stacks, I think it goes up to max, right? That's going to give you a flat 3% accuracy, which is really nice to use. And then you have your affinity modifiers, and this was new to me. I always thought like the Gothic staff and different items were just like flat as well, like flat bonuses, and in some ways they are, but these actually go into your affinity, and you have things like the Gothic staff in there, the Statius Warhammer, and some really good items that are definitely worth using, especially if you're using Mage with the Gothic staff. It's a free staff that you can get through the Mage Arena, and it's just so nice to take, and you can use it at certain times. Yes, you're going to sacrifice 25% adren when you use it, but if you use it at the right time, it can really pay off. For example, let's say Purple Bomb rotation is really nice to use there, but on Team Split rotation, Purple Bomb in Phase 5, it's really nice to use, but when you're in a TS in Phase 5, it's not so great to use because you have a lack of time, and you probably don't want to sacrifice that adren. You probably want to push out more DPS thresholds in that time. So it's really interesting to use these sort of weapons, and it's interesting in my opinion. I find it really cool to read up on this stuff and really understand, you know, what I'm actually using and why I'm using it. Alright, that's enough discussion though around the dual wield compared against two-handed weapons. I'm now going to focus on the flanking perk, which is getting more into the spotlight as a perk. It's a weapon perk. Backhand impact and binding shot no longer stun, and instead they will deal 40% more damage per rank to targets that are not facing you. That's 40% more damage per rank. The maximum rank for this is 3, but I've heard it's quite hard to get 3 on it. But it's a crazy amount of damage increase for these basic abilities, and it even boosts up your threshold abilities as well, the stun abilities. So forceful backhand, deep impact for mage, and tight bindings for range. They will no longer stun, but instead deal 15% more damage per rank to targets that are not facing you. And that is the important part, that are not facing you, hence why it's called flanking, and it really adds a new dynamic to the boss fight for DPSs. So what you could do is take a switch, put flanking perk on, get behind and position yourself well and deal some damage. Again, I've not really looked into it. People are saying that it's not really worth having over other perks right now that are the meta, like all the time, but it's worth it if you can afford to take a switch for it. Maybe in the future with certain bosses we might see flanking overpowering other perks if you prioritize your stun abilities over other abilities and get your rotation down and can always be behind the bosses when you're DPSing. I don't know, but it really will be, again, a situational thing. I think you've got all these really great perks, but I think in the future there definitely needs to be a better alternative, I think, to the perking system right now. Just to reduce the amount of switches that people are taking and need to take to boss fights. Whether it's just their plan to do this so people buy out more weapons and it's a money sink in some ways, or whether it's really they're trying to really make people think, okay, I'm gonna just prioritize this and just see how it goes. But there will always be a set of perks that will always be overall better to have in terms of cost efficiently. So I really don't know. It would be nice to have a better alternative with all these perks to allow us to be a bit more free with them, but yeah, I get where they're coming from in some ways. But there you go, new perk, flanking. It's not brand new, but it's getting more in the spotlight now, and it is really crazy. A mate of mine, Chewy, was using it in Virago. He takes a switch, and when he does unleash it and has flanking on, he unleashes like a deep impact, and you see those 10Ks out of nowhere, which you don't see that often. And you see that 10k just come out of nowhere, and you're like, mate, did you just use flanking? Yes, he did. And it was, you know, it's really nice to see. And then even impacts are hitting. He was saying like 8k's pluses and stuff, and it is crazy the amount of damage that you can now get out of those stun abilities with flanking. So a really fun perk to use as a DPS DPSer, where you're going to want to now manage your position within the boss fight in order to get more damage out of those abilities. It really does add a new way of DPSing, and I think I'd really like to see more stuff like this added to the game. You know, at the moment, yeah, positioning kind of influences certain things where you might not want to get damaged by the tank or get melee swiped by Virago, let's say, if you're too close. But now it's actually, you can actually think about your positioning now within the boss fight in order to get more damage output, and then combining that with the actual abilities that you're using, and therefore changing your rotations. And yeah, it just makes you think differently, and I think it, you know, definitely makes it more fun in certain boss fights. And I'm just going to quickly touch on the Soul Reaper update that came out of nowhere. And first off, you know, surprises can be really good in the game. I really do like the strategy that they're taking with a lot of things. You know, they're leaving it a surprise. And when I first read it, and I was like, oh god, cool, Soul Reaper update. This is, you know, definitely something which I didn't think about, but it's definitely a piece of content that could have been done with updating. I was excited to see another surprise update to the game, but I know I'm going to get like some comments down below of people, of trimmed capers, you know, being a bit peed off about, you know, how it is a bit too big of a surprise. I think surprises are definitely a great thing, but maybe balance it out with how long that requirement's going to take, possibly. But I definitely do want to keep pushing these surprises, because it personally makes me more hyped about the game, because if we got told about everything which is coming to the game, it would be extremely boring to play, in my opinion. So just to get those surprises on a Monday and be like, cool, this sounds awesome, let's jump in, see what it's about, is a good thing. But overall, just to touch on it briefly, probably the biggest thing that stood out to me and to everybody was the Book of Death. It sounds pretty cool. Essentially, it will unleash a big ton of damage on the boss at a point in time, and it does sound really cool. It's a pocket slot item. However, after some people have done some number crunching on it, it works out to be way more expensive than even just using your tier 90 boots that no one really ever uses because they are too expensive. I think it works out double as expensive as that. Something around, I don't know if I'm going to get these numbers correct, something like 24.7k or so per activation. So it is very costly, I've heard, so I don't know whether they're going to do some balancing with that. You can also buy the Reaper's Choice, which is a permanent unlock, and it gives you a 1 out of 10 chance of being able to choose your actual Reaper task. This is a really cool one, in my opinion. And alongside that, the Death support really stands out to me, where it permanently increases the amount healed from Sign and Portents of Life and Death by 100%. This is a really good unlock, but that does cost 250 reward points. I'll probably prioritize that ahead of the Reaper's Choice. And then you do have a cool cosmetic, a Gravestone Loot Beam. So that is episode 2 of What's New in PvM. If you are enjoying this series, make sure to give this video a like, and I will continue to make them. I do enjoy producing these. And yeah, next 2 is out on Monday, guys. I've actually, like a true nerd, I've booked the day off work for next 2. I was contemplating it. I booked it off a couple of days ago, and I will be streaming next 2 on release. Let me know if you are looking forward to next 2 in the comments section. Feel free to discuss stuff there. I'll reply to comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.